So, and welcome everybody to the 21st Annual Prison and Aftercare Ministry Conference. Um, this is a pretty important conference for the Department of Corrections. We rely very heavily on volunteers and volunteer services, both inside and out of correctional facilities. And many of our people in our custody would not stand a chance of successful reentry if it wasn't for the prison ministry group. And our volunteers at whole. One of the things that always strikes me about volunteers within the DOC is other forms of volunteerism, volunteering at kids camps, volunteering to clean up on the roads. People celebrate those volunteers pretty outwardly, and you see it all along within our culture of those kind of celebrations. In terms of corrections volunteers, very little attention gets paid to how reliant departments of corrections all across the country are on volunteers, and specifically our Department of Corrections. We have thousands of hours donated by volunteers across the system, and if it wasn't for those volunteers, we would be in a much worse place than any budget discussion like we're having now, whatever suggest. One of the things that I appreciate is that some of the volunteers that I deal with, specifically in the prison ministry program, deal with really difficult cases. So we're not talking about cases that would otherwise be successful, but the cases that without volunteers would not have any chance of success. One of the things I'd like to start with is thanking Pastor Pete and Joanne for all of their leadership in this program, and a special thanks to those two because they deal with some of the cases I'm talking about where the rest of the communities don't want to deal with specific cases, and if it wasn't for Joanne and Pete, I don't know what the outcome would be. One of the things that communities struggle with in dealing with people under DOC custody is that some of the people in our custody are going to get out either way, and the community refuses to engage, or in cases that we see recently, negatively engages, and volunteers step in and make the difference in those cases. It's by no mistake that some of the cases that we've talked about publicly over the last few years, you haven't heard anything about them, and a large part of that is because we have people who have volunteered to step up and stick with the people that are involved in these cases, and it does make all the difference in the world. There's a few things that I want to address specifically with volunteers. I know people have a lot of questions about budget, personal safety issues, and so on and so forth. So the big one is the budget. There was a lot of discussion this year around the public budget. A lot of that didn't really have to do with the DOC. We were on a 0% budget increase because of our falling caseload. The good news is things that we've been saying all along. Crime rates have been falling. The DOC has been putting more people on furlough and other things along the way, and detention's down. Our caseloads are down, and so we've been able to maintain a budget that has been 0%, or in the last 5 years, for instance, less than 3%, which is amazing. Back more than 10 years ago, when I was in the administrative services arm of the business, there were double-digit percentage increase years where we would wipe out the general fund for the rest of the state government. Now we're in the reverse position where we're being held to such a low level that the general fund can go elsewhere. So it's a huge success story. A lot of this ties back to people getting involved in COSAs, community justice centers, and so people are diverting from the system, or when they get out they have supports. Our recidivism rate is holding steady. I'm about to finish my 9th year, and I'm looking at all the things that are going right in the Department of Corrections. We have 2 or 3 negative events that get pretty much all of the media coverage, but if you look at all the things going right in the DOC, it's pretty amazing where we are right now. So the budget really isn't going to affect the DOC, other than the high school conversation, which would have happened anyway because of something that I'm sure you see as a volunteer, which is that our population is actually aging quite substantially. The number of people over the age of 50 incarcerated right now has tripled from where it was 10 years ago, and the number of people in our custody that are under the age of, say, 25 has dropped way off. And so a high school that was originally built to serve a corrections population of a large young adult population in DOC isn't there anymore. John Gorsuch once said 1 out of 6 youth in Vermont under the age, I think it was 23 at the time, are in DOC custody or under or supervision. That does not exist anymore. It's a great success story, but it's presenting other problems now where we have an aging population. A lot of them may have had a sex offense in their background. Reentry is much tougher for them. Wraparound supports, healthcare, all those things are a lot more complicated. But in terms of the work that we're doing in the DOC, we're still intact. We have more transitional housing sites now than we ever had before. Our staff is still intact, and our services are still intact. Our programs are not being cut, other than the high school piece, which looks like it's going to take a small cut, but not substantial. So I just wanted to clear that up. I've tried to get that message out. I didn't want to do that during the legislative session because it was changing throughout the session, how much our budget was going to reduce, because it was, frankly, it waved a lot. One of the things I'm aware of, particularly through conversations with Pete and Joanne, are safety issues as they pertain to volunteers. And I know that our population has changed. It's not filled with young misdemeanors anymore. It's a population that has a larger out-of-state population than it has in the past, which bring different elements to it than we've been accustomed to in the department, and it's going to affect the work that you do, and it probably is already in terms of gang violence and so on and so forth. I am not opposed to, and I've engaged with Pete on some of these issues around bringing in specialized training or other things that volunteers need. As those things come up, I'd like to hear about them directly and be able to respond in a way that guards your safety. We're all very aware in the DOC of safety issues, me in particular, and so anything that volunteers think they need, I'm open to it, and I'd even be willing to talk about funding for programs that increase safety awareness. I don't want to go overboard either. There's definitely a middle ground. This is our population. We have to work with them, and they present certain challenges, but there's also the issue of personal safety that we have to take seriously. If people have specific recommendations, or if you have a recommendation to some of the directives we have as they pertain to volunteers, I'd be happy to entertain a directive rewrite. So I put that offer out there. I want to make sure that we always appreciate our volunteers and do the best we can to support and grow the ranks. I am aware that Pete can't go on forever as much as I'd like him to. At least I'd like him to stay as long as I do, because he does a lot of work, a lot of good work for me personally, because I ask him on specific cases. But I want to make sure that we're attracting the next generation of volunteers who pick up this work. It's important, and it's work that you have to really believe in. There's no real personal gain other than the benefit you get from helping somebody out, which you have to target specific individuals that get that feeling that of helping somebody. It's not just something that we can hire off the street. So, you know, we have a volunteer coordinator in the central office. He's always available to do recruitments if you think, or to help you with questions, and I want to make sure that you as volunteers feel the appreciation that you really deserve. We could not do this work without you. I wish I was there with you this weekend. My wife had other plans for me, which I just basically let her tell me what to do because it's just easier. And so I've tried to make most of these events because it's really important that volunteers know they are an integral part of this system. And one of the things I often tell the governor is it isn't as if volunteers are on the bottom of this. The volunteers are at the top end, taking on the most difficult cases. People that go into COSAs are the most difficult cases that we have. They're resource intensive. They require a lot of human capital, and so they're not systems that we create for people that may get in trouble on low-level crimes. These are people that are coming out of jail, that have very high-level crimes, a lot of community sentiment, so on and so forth, and that's what we say the resource for. All that said, it couldn't exist without volunteers. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for the hard work that you do. One final appreciation to Pete and Joanne for all the work they do putting this together every year. It's all volunteer time on their part, and I really appreciate it. So I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope that any questions that you have going forward, you'll feel free to send them to me. So thank you.